I should explain it?
You already did.
On what? Whoa.
Whoa.
Hello to you too,
The
Sam.
paper was exploded all up on it.
Other things that I can talk about or explain to you of where we're at and where we're headed.
No.
Does that actually speak for all of you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
For once.
Then, today, questions. Yesterday we talked about the French-Canadian War. Questions about it.
The entire.
Or Tuesday we talked about the French-Canadian War. Yesterday you guys went down to the commons area and did nothing.
I actually accomplished stuff.
I did my QDs.
Oh, okay. So,
Me and Ash actually worked on stuff.
okay. I stand corrected. I apologize.
Okay.
So, now getting back to that. Any questions on where we left off Tuesday? Alex?
What if Spanish got all of the land of the French that they lost?
Okay, so under the Treaty of Paris, you're going to have land exchange. What year?
1763.
Okay. So the treaty that ends the French-Canadian War is the Treaty of Paris of 1763, and you've got three countries involved: the French, English, and Spanish. The French and the Spanish lose. Okay. So under the negotiation of the treaty, what England wants is to minimize their threats. How do you minimize your threats in the New World? Well, you get rid of the French, right? So you want to get them completely out of there. So you take Canada from them. You have to punish the Spanish because they got involved and helped the French out. So you take Florida from them, but they were only involved for the last year or two. So you can't really punish them that much because at the same time you still want to severely punish the French. So you take the French lands that we call the Louisiana Territory, or will call the Louisiana Territory, and you take that from the French and you give it to the Spanish. Now the French are completely out of the New World, and the Spanish are on the other side of the Mississippi River, which, as far as the English are concerned, is perfect because they don't want to expand or don't plan on expanding west of the Appalachian Mountains. They expand everything from the Mississippi to the Appalachians. That's just going to be for the natives. That's going to how they're going to minimize that threat. So they just kind of move things around, and now you don't have any more threats, which is perfect in their world. Is that?
Yeah, but why would they want to take the land, the French land?
If you're not going to, remember we can't look at history from our perspective, because obviously from our perspective it saves us $15 million because in 1803 we're going to purchase that from the French anyway. But you got to look at it in 1763. We've already got more land than England can handle. Now you're going to take everything to the Mississippi River, and you don't plan on expanding that far. Why do you want everything to the Rocky Mountains, or however far Louisiana Territory was partitioned at that point in time? You've got to minimize your threats, and you don't want to escalate things, because you can't take, you're taking Spanish Florida. You can't have them angry at you. So you're going to take that, we're going to give you this, because the Spanish are going to be there anyway. They've got Mexico and the American Southwest. You want to appease them enough that they're not going to have a hostile relationship with you. Is that, okay. Rochelle?
How come, after Braddock, whatever his name was, well, Washington lost that first, whatever battle.
At Fort Necessity, yeah.
And then after that, when Braddock got killed, why did they let him take over when he just lost them before that? Why did they let him kill him?
Why did Washington get to take over?
Yeah.
Like I said, Washington's an interesting character. I mean, we put him up on that pedestal, and see him as the father of our country and all those good things. And politically and motivationally, he's a great leader. Tactically, his field command comes under question a lot. When we get to the Revolution, I mean, at the end of 1776, a lot of people want him hung. They want him gone. So why at that point in time? Well, he lost Fort Necessity. Why? Okay, so he was caught by surprise. It wasn't really a war party. They were out scouting and surveying the land. So that's not really his fault. Goes out with Braddock. Is it his fault that they lost at the Battle of Fort Duquesne? Washington's fault? No, it's Braddock's fault. Braddock is the one who methodically marches through the wilderness and things like that. You can't really pin that on Washington either. So when Pitt takes over, it's just, Washington can do it. He's been there twice. He's young, he's energetic, he's not old school, he's not coming over here from England with those preconceived ideas. Give him a chance. And it turns out being successful. I mean, they take it over, rename it, yada, yada, yada. And like I said, I mean, that's really the extent of Washington's military career until the Revolution. And then he becomes the commander-in-chief of the colonial forces, which, some people question greatly, but he's got a uniform, so let's let him use it. Other questions? Paul?
On Tuesday when you were saying that, like after the French-Indian War, the British took Florida from Spain as like punishment for siding with France.
Yep.
Was there like a battle over Florida, or was it just the Spanish were like, okay, yep, you're right?
It's negotiated in the treaty.
Okay.
So they sat down, the three diplomats sit down from the three countries, and because England wins, England gets to dictate the peace. Okay, but they've got to do it tactfully. That's what I was talking with Alice about, that you got to do it to make yourself come out better, but you don't want to anger everybody. And again, England's #1 goal is get the French out of here. I mean, the Spanish are on a downward spiral a little bit. Their peak's kind of gone. The French are still there, so we want to get them out of the New World. Sam?
I just have like a quick question. Okay, like the British gave, it was the Indians like a peace offering or something, and then they ended up all getting smallpox. Is that why they signed the treaty? It was just because that, like, so many of them were dying?
Yeah, the Ottawa, in Chief Pontiac's War, and the Ottawa Nation can't, because they get decimated from the smallpox contamination, they can't fight anymore. So the British have, introduced germ warfare, intentional germ warfare, for the purpose of minimizing an enemy to force them into submission, so that the British are at a stronger bargaining position. They get to dictate the peace because the Ottawa can't defend themselves. They're stuck. Anything else? Alex?
When we took Florida from the Spanish, they talked about how none of the Spanish were willing to stay, but they all kind of like moved back or stayed back into Mexico, and that the French, even though they had lost the territory, a lot of the settlers stayed there. Why was that? Why were the Spanish so upset about it and the French were like, we don't even care?
Because the Spanish, and this, my interpretation of it is that the Spanish are much more closely connected, especially in Florida, to Spain. They're there on the king's or on the queen's dime, and they're kind of reliant on that. And they don't want to, they don't necessarily they're living there to convert people. So when the English take over, it then becomes, well, it's obviously not going to be Catholic anymore. And so that they've got a religious friction there. So they just they don't want to live under that system. The French, on the other hand, they're making money. If you're a French fur trader in the Great Lakes region, whether you are under the French flag or under the English flag, you're trading with the Indians and you're getting paid. So to them it was, they were more integrated into the land. You've got a lot more French that are intermingling with the Native Americans. They're making homes there. And it's still true today. I mean, you look at Eastern Canada, heavily French influence. You look at New Orleans, the mouth of the Mississippi, heavily French influence. So you got different things. And New Orleans has got a lot of Spanish influence too, but it's primarily French. So it's just how what their purpose is on the land. Anything else? Rochelle?
What was like the main reason that the Ottawa started attacking the British at the end of the treaty form? Was there like a certain reason, or did they just get annoyed?
The Ottawa had been helping the French in the French-Indian War, and when the French bowed out, the Ottawa felt that they were still in a place where, at least in the Great Lakes region, in the on the U.S. side of the Great Lakes, that they could they could dictate, they could force the English out of there, so they could maintain their land. So they saw an opportunity that the English were weakened after the 7 Years' War, or after the French and Indian War, is a good opportunity for them to defeat them. Because I mean, basically they're trying to maintain the lands that they've lived on. Anything else? Paul?
So, I know you're talking about, the Fort Necessity thing was like George Washington's crew wasn't even part of the army.
They're part of the army, but
Part of the army.
they're not military regulars. It's a survey crew.
So, okay, so what was their job? What were they supposed to do?
They were sent out there officially to survey the land, to find out the size and plot it and things like that. Unofficially, they were there to check the size and strength of the French forces. How strong, how many men did the French have out there?
Alright,
Anything else? I'm assuming that since we talked about this Tuesday, you guys read the next section, right?
no,
On what happens after the French and Indian War?
oh. You were supposed to do that?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what I said Tuesday.
Oh, I
That
don't
since
remember
I
that.
was talking about this, you can bypass a
I
little
didn't
bit.
remember that.
Oh, okay.
So what reading part are we supposed to be on?
The
182.
182 to 196, is that what?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh.
So that'll make things interesting today. Okay. So, going forward, changes due to the French and Indian War. There are a lot of things that are going to change. Natives. Up to this point in time, the majority of natives have sided with the French. Why?
Nicer.
Nicer. Why else?
Treat them like equals.
Treat them not necessarily like equals, but they don't cheat them as much as the English do. Okay, so that's fair to say. Okay, now with the French out of North America, they're really at a bit larger disadvantage than they were before. Because prior to this, they can go, you got to get past this idea that these natives aren't intelligent. Okay, once you introduce them to business practices and how business and trade works, they're going to figure it out, and they do. So the natives start figuring out, well, I've got X amount of goods, I've gone out and trapped this many animals, I got this many furs, I can go to the French and I can go to the English, and whoever gives me the most, I will trade with them. Now the French are gone, who are they going to trade with? The English, it's all that's left. Okay, are the English, is there any more competition?
No.
No, so what happens to the value of the furs that the Indians and the natives trap?
Go down.
They go down. The English don't have to give them top dollar. So the Native American position is really going to get weakened post-French and Indian War. British control starts becoming a question because the British are trying to minimize problems with the natives. They don't want, your book talks, I think, is going to talk about the cost of keeping an army here. Okay, and it's very expensive. And so the British are wrestling with how do we maintain control of the colonies. Well, we have to have a military there to defend them. We can't have people going farther west. Okay, we need to keep them in the 13 colonies. So we don't want them going west of the Appalachians. Okay, and there's two reasons why. Why don't they want the colonists moving west? Okay? Yeah, if the British are looking to minimize problems with the natives, and you're going to give everything from the Appalachians to the Mississippi and basically say, natives, we've already pushed you that far, we're not going to come over there anymore. You can't have colonists going over there because it's going to cause conflict, okay? Which it will. Why else don't they want them moving west of the Appalachians? Yeah. Right now, they've got the 13 colonies boxed in, particularly prior to the French and Indian War. You've got the French to the north, you've got the Spanish to the south, and you have the Appalachians to the west. And then you've got the Atlantic, obviously, to the east. They live in a very small, not a small, but an area that you can control. They can't really expand. Once they start expanding, it becomes very difficult to control them, which the English want to control. Okay, you can't have these colonists going out and doing whatever they want. On this side, what's going to happen is the colonists stepped up. During the war, the colonial militias are going to step up and they're going to prove themselves. they're going to come out of this war with the idea that, why do we have the British military here? Okay, if the British are here to protect us, well, the French are gone, the Spanish are 1,000 miles away, the natives are right there, and we can defend ourselves. We proved in the French and Indian War that the colonists can defend themselves against native attacks. So they're starting to question why the British are here. They're starting to wonder, you know, why can't we have some autonomy? Why can't we just govern ourselves and rule ourselves? Okay? They're forgetting, you know, that that's just not allowed. The other thing it does is it sets the table for French revenge, which becomes very important, because after the war, the French are not at all happy. They've lost everything they own in the New World. They've been defeated by the British, and as far as they're concerned, they're looking for a way to get back at them. You know what is a good way to get back at them? Take their land. Okay, that would require another major war that they've already been defeated, so that's going to be tough to do. Alex?
Cyber colonists during the revolution.
Yeah. When we start our revolution, the French enjoy it immensely, because it's an opportunity for them to help us defeat the British. That's why Ben Franklin goes over to France, because there's a pretty good idea that the French are willing to give us money and supplies and eventually forces to defeat the British, because they want them humiliated. They want the British to lose. If France can't have any colonies or have any land over here, they don't want England to have any either. Okay? So these are the kind of changes that are going to happen after the French and Indian War. It does cause some problems. You're going to see some people starting showing up. I was going to find my James Otis grave marker, but I forgot. One of the colonists, a guy by the name of James Otis, you know, the colonists are going to start talking. They're going to start trying to figure things out and start wondering, you know, how can we bring about change? How can we get some more differences? Otis is going to be one of these people that does this. And I need to see, basically, why can't, they bring forth the idea of representing themselves. Why can't the colonists have representation in Parliament? Should they? Should the 13 English colonies have a voice in English Parliament? Angie, you're telling me, you're shaking your head, yes. Why?
Because they never was English. England.
Okay, so they're from England, many of them. Okay? Ashley, did you agree with that idea? Why?
That was a question.
What was the question?
Actually, this is what we need.
Why should the colonists have a voice? Should the 13 colonies have representation in British Parliament? Yes. Should I ask the follow-up question again, or just let it go with yes? Yeah, okay, we'll just go with yes. Nolan, you're shaking your head no.
They're not in England, so
Okay,
they're their own group.
okay. Alex?
Everything that passes in England, the colonists have to abide by too, so all of their little rules and everything. So they should have a choice if they want to, or have at least a chance of voting yes or no on it.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in? So just because rules in England apply to them, they should have a voice. No one still disagrees.
No one doesn't
I mean,
count.
That'd be like
Who wants to go to Mars?
It'd be like Mexico coming to the United States and saying, or they get some of our land and then they can decide our.
Okay. Let me just throw it this way. India is a British colony. Okay? Should India have a voice? I mean, what's the difference between India and the colonies? Because that, I mean, this is really what it comes down to. They're both colonies. Okay? What's the difference between India as a British property and the 13 colonies as British property? Jessica?
Like, they should be able to have a say in the things that are gonna affect them.
So they should have a voice in what affects them only.
Yeah, cause if it's like taxes that are just in England, then they don't really need to do.
Okay, John?
I have a question. Does India have taxes too? Are they being taxed by the British, or is it?
Yeah, okay, you guys are getting hung up on this whole tax thing. The taxes that England is in part, okay, first of all, why does England, after the war, England is going to tax the colonies? Why?
Pay for the war.
The war is expensive. The war costs them a lot of money, okay? What was the purpose of this war? To get the French out, to protect the colonists from French invasion. So who had benefited the most from this war?
Colonists.
So who should have to pay for it? So the tax thing is a moot point. I mean, you guys, I didn't hear one dissenting voice that said that England should have to pay for it. The colonies, they're the only ones that benefit from this. You know, we get this strange idea that, you know, the 13 English colonies are the crown jewel in England's land. The 13 colonies are a very minor part of the English Empire. They don't really care about us that much. That's why when we get to the Revolution, they're kind of like, okay, yeah, we have to go fight them because it sets a bad example for the rest of our colonies, but, you know, we're not going to give it our all. They're much more concerned with India, they're much more concerned with other properties they have because there's more value there. Think about what value is there in the 13 colonies? I mean, tobacco, okay. Eventually cotton. Yes, we've got lumber. Yes, we've got fishing. But there's no gold in the 13 colonies. There's nothing that is really tying this, you know, making England say, hey, you know what, we have to hold on to them at all costs. Okay? So the taxation thing is really a moot point. It comes down to, yes, I mean, obviously it's going to become about taxation, but it's not necessarily the taxes. Taxes have been paid. The colonists are paying taxes at this time. It's about representation and whether or not they deserve it in Parliament. Rochelle?
I'm gonna argue about tags I put down, and I forgot what I was
Okay,
gonna say.
you think. Grayson?
What was England's most prized possession?
Oh, I remember now.
Probably India. Because of, you know, the different things that India holds, you know, spices, silks, things like that, that they're really kind of the cat's meow as far as the empire is concerned. Rochelle, no meowing in class, please.
Well, like, when you were asking if we should get a say in government or whatever, does India have a say or no?
No, they don't.
Well, are they as big of a threat to, like, try to, like, break away from Britain or no, or from
No,
England?
they won't break away until much
Well,
later.
then that's why they won't let us have a say, because we're expanding.
It's that, England, okay, I agree. Okay, England doesn't want us to have a say because if we have a say, then they've got to give everybody a say. Okay? Why do the colonists think they should have a voice? So is India. So should India, the people of India, have a voice? Why?
Are the people in India from?
No, they're people from India.
Well, there's people from
fair.
England over in the countries.
Okay, but by this point in time, most of the colonists, they're not necessarily from England. I mean, they're people that have been born here and raised here. So it's not like, you know, the first settlers, it's not like John Smith is asking for a voice in Parliament. These are people that may have never been to England before, but they're attached, they're part of the English Empire. Okay? Does that make a difference in thought processes at all, or do we still believe that they should have a voice? We still believe they should have a voice. Paul?
I think it's because, I don't know who said that the rules apply to them. It's just that, you know, they wouldn't want rules to be, you know, favoring like the homeland and, you know, kind of, you know, cheat the colonies or anything like that.
Okay, but you answered my question and refute yourself in your response in saying the colonies should be equal to the homeland. Why should the colonies be equal to the homeland?
Well, they can have like one person come and be a part of the diplomatic process.
Why? What right do they have? They have no equality. Do they? I mean, you know, Washington D.C. doesn't have equal political standing in the United States today.
Why didn't the 13 colonies have like?
Because they're a colony. It's not England.
Yeah, but
They were it goes back to the mercantile system. They didn't establish them for the purpose of giving them equality and making them an equal part of England. They established them to rape their natural resources and take them back.
Yeah, but
Make money for them.
Who established the colonies though? And
England did.
and settled them. It's people from the homeland, so they should
You're-
be,
And why did those people leave England?
because they were sick of the homeland,
Why were they sick of the homeland?
because they didn't wanna be there anymore.
Persecution.
There's a ruin, persecution, what else? What didn't these people have in England?
Freedom.
Land. Without land, you don't
Have a voice.
have a voice in government.
And now they have land, so now they want to say.
Exactly. But it's not in England. I mean, you kind of got to think of, name a famous colonial American. The most famous. Pocahontas, not an English American. Thanks, Andrew.
And
Huh?
Franklin.
Ben Franklin, okay? George Washington. If you took these guys back to England, okay, they are nothing. Okay? They aren't even heard from in England. Okay? So, this is good. I've got you guys thinking about this because there is no reason for the colonies to have a voice in government. India is not going to get a voice in government. And you guys don't seem to have a problem with that because who doesn't live there?
Us.
English don't. Okay? Well, they don't get a voice because they're native Indians. But because the white people in the colonies want a voice, they should have a voice. Well, you can't, they're equal things. You can't give the 13 colonies a voice, but not India. And that's England's position. Okay? So James Otis, he's on your guys' side. He believes that the 13 colonies should have a voice in Parliament. They should have representation on things that concern them. Okay? Does that make sense? And obviously, he's not the only one because eventually we will formulate organizations like the Sons of Liberty and different things that will resist English government and rule on us. Okay, is that fair? Makes sense? Alright. Okay, so I'd like to talk about a little bit, and I'm just going to expand on this a little bit. You have, after the war, England has some issues. Okay, and it kind of ties into what we talked about in the red words at the beginning. After the war, defending and governing the colonies becomes a major issue for them. It's large. Okay, the 13 colonies and now all of the land they've taken from France is a very large territory. How do you govern that? How do you defend all of that? It would take more than the entire British Army to defend the land that they own over here. And how do you govern it? Okay, and these aren't things unique to England. These are things that when we start talking about our independence, our founding fathers are going to have to wrestle with. How do you defend? How do you govern an area this large? Okay, keeping in mind that Germany is a rather large European country and it's the size of Montana. Okay, expansion. Are you going to let them expand? Well, we kind of talked about that. We can't really let them go. It's too hard to govern them. I can't let you guys, go over to Mr. Stigman's room or the computer lab and try and teach you. Okay, it's too hard for me to govern you and control you that way. They need the colonists quarantined a little bit. They've got a huge debt. Okay, they owe a lot of money after this war, and you've already decided who should have to pay for it. The colonists should. Does anybody have a problem with the colonists having to pay for this war? Okay, I mean it makes sense. It's for their benefit. They should have to pay for it. Okay, and keep in mind, when we start talking about taxes, if we could go and find the percentage or the amounts an English person paid in taxes compared to a colonist, you'd be amazed at the small percentage that a colonist actually paid to England. Okay, as opposed to an English person. I mean, is it fair that somebody living in, someplace in England, London, paid for the French and Indian War? Not really, okay? And then the last thing is incorporation of the 13. How do we want to, how is it possible that we could possibly incorporate the 13 colonies into the English Empire, or at least the English government? What are we going to do with them? What are some possibilities? Okay. Well, we do have a government system in place over here. We have colonial ministers, we have colonial governors. Each of the colonies has set up its own political system with various things, Virginia House of Burgesses, things like that, state assemblies, or colonial assemblies. So, you know, all we need to do is somehow bridge the gap a little bit. So, colonial minister, George Grenville, takes over shortly after the war. And when he does so, he's going to pass a series of laws, or acts. So the first question up there, who should pay for the war? You've already answered that, okay? The colonists should have to pay for this thing. Now, the bigger question comes in, and this is one of the things that the colonists start getting concerned about or worried about is, after the war, the British soldiers stay here. Why? Alex?
Keep them here, in case they're needed again,
Okay, in case they're needed for what?
for the war.
Okay, Jessica?
To keep the colonists in line and make sure that they're paying all the taxes they're supposed to.
Okay. Paul, you wanted to chirp in?
I was gonna say something about, you know, it's gonna be a lot of work to bring them all back.
Okay.
And might be expensive to bring them back.
Okay, not just to bring them back, but maybe eventually have to
Have to ship them back to the
ship them
colonies.
back over to the colonies. Okay? So we have a situation where, what is the military here for? Well, the military here, as far as England is concerned, is for what Alex said. The British military is here to defend their land. From whom? Well, natives, Spanish, whomever. Okay? Maybe the French want to, you know, try to attack again. I don't know. The colonists, on the other hand, eventually start to looking at it like, from Jessica's point of view. They're not here to protect us. They're here to oppress us. They're not here defending us from anybody. They're here keeping their thumb on us, making sure that we follow their rules. And we don't like that very much. All right? So the series of laws, most of them really don't cause that big of a problem. The Royal Proclamation of 1763, obviously the year that the war ends, it draws a line down the Appalachian Mountains and says that colonists cannot move west of that line. And so you've got, I don't know how long the Appalachians run from Georgia up to Pennsylvania, New York. Paul?
So, well, what would they do if someone just, like a family decides to go past the Appalachians? Are they gonna chase after them, or?
Okay, so that's where you run into a problem. Is this enforceable?
Not really.
To a degree it is. I mean, there's only certain ways, you know, Daniel Boone's going to be building a road. There's only certain ways that you can get across the Appalachians. So it is enforceable to some degree. The other part of the Royal Proclamation is that if you already live out west, you live in the Ohio River Valley, you've got to move back. Okay, so you know, Tyler, you spent 10 years cutting your homestead out of the wilderness in Ohio, and now the British government says you're going to move back. Are you going to move back?
No.
Probably not. Okay. What England is trying to do is they're trying to minimize their responsibility. Because if they don't do this and a colonist, you know, Tyler's family gets massacred by natives in the Ohio River Valley, whose responsibility is it to attack and defend his honor? Who has to send their army out there to fight the Indians? The British do. Why? Because they didn't tell Tyler not to live out there. Now, the British can say, you know what? Tyler was out there illegally. He wasn't supposed to be out there. He and his family weren't supposed to be out there. We have no obligation whatsoever to take our military out into that region and fight an Indian war. Okay? This isn't odd. This, you know, this is going to happen again and again when we get into World War II. It's called the Lusitania Clause. They're just trying to cut their losses. Is it enforceable? It's very difficult. but they're trying to minimize things. If you really wanted to move out into the Ohio River Valley or into the Mississippi River Valley, you certainly were going to be able to do it. It's just England's telling you that not. And what's the reason behind that? I mean, besides minimizing the native conflict, they don't want you moving west because
It's hard to
Can't
manage.
control.
you can't control them. Okay, they want to keep you in a nice, controlled area. Is the proclamation of 1763 going to anger everybody? Is everybody, all colonists in the 13 English colonies, going to be mad about the proclamation of 1763?
No.
No. Okay, it's going to affect a few, but the majority of people, it's like, you know, it really doesn't matter. I hadn't planned on uprooting my family and moving into that region anyway. I really don't want to cut down trees again. The Sugar Act of 1764, also known as the Revenue Act of 1764. Molasses is a very important product at this time. It's used for a lot of different things. And the Sugar Act of 1764 is going to increase the tax on molasses. Today, it's really a tariff, is what it is. It's a tax on goods coming into this country. Okay, so the colonies are importing molasses from the Caribbean islands, and then they're turning around and processing it or selling it as molasses, whatever. How many of you, when a tariff is increased in the United States, get really angry at our government? And how many of you have no clue when that happens? Yeah, most people have no association of it whatsoever, but all of a sudden you go to the store and a product that you're used to buying now is more expensive. Who do you get angry at?
Store.
The store, because they're the one who set the price, right? Okay, so the Sugar Act is going to have an impact on the colonies, but most of the people that are upset about it are store owners. Okay, they're the ones who are either having to absorb that cost or they have to raise their prices, and they're the ones who get the backlash from the colonists. So most of the colonists don't get really worked up about the Sugar Act. It's mainly a business kind of thing. It's an import tax. Okay, the Currency Act of 1764 said the colonists can't print their own money anymore. Which, you know, when you think about it, is that a good idea? I mean, when we start looking at the formation of our country, if all 13 states of the original 13 American states had their own money, would that work really well?
Not really.
No. It would work okay in 1790 because you don't have a lot of people traveling to other places. Would it work really well today if all 50 states had their own money? No, it'd be complete chaos. I mean, if you've ever had to go to a foreign country and exchange money, it'd be the same thing. You know, and really, if you can make associations, a lot of the things that we go through in our formative time, Europe is going through now. Okay, you know, 10 years ago they went to the euro, a unified money system and things like that. They're trying to simplify things a little bit. Okay, so the Currency Act doesn't have a huge impact on everybody. It kind of makes sense. The problem is that it causes an imbalance of finances. So you are going to have some people that are losing some money. Again, it's not going to be a major deal. Quartering Act of 1765. You may know what it means to quarter something. Alice?
To like house it?
Yeah. You have to provide housing and food to British soldiers under the Quartering Act. So, are there British soldiers stationed throughout the 13 colonies? Yes. Where are the bulk of them? What region?
The middle column.
Okay, middle to northern. Okay, from New York north, you're going to have, or Pennsylvania north, I suppose, is where the majority of these soldiers are going to be. Now, why are the British going to make you house and feed their soldiers?
They don't have to.
So they don't have to. It's a cost-saving measure. Why is it fair? Why not? Why are these soldiers here? To protect me. I don't know. I guess if the Canadians thought about attacking Minnesota, if a couple of National Guardsmen wanted to spend a couple nights in my basement and I had to feed them so that I don't get attacked by hockey pucks and Canadian bacon, I'd probably put them up in my basement to protect me. Okay? It's not outlandish. Oh, okay, yeah, in 2011 it seems ridiculous that you would take an army and put them in your barn and keep them there for a couple of weeks or however long it takes. Not at the time. okay? It is fairly common. Is everybody going to be affected by the Quartering Act? No, because they have barracks here, they've got, you know, they just don't want to have to build more, because it's expensive, okay? So again, the Quartering Act, none of these first four really anger enough of the colonies to really get worked up about, okay? Small pockets, yes, not everybody, okay? The Stamp Act of 1765 is a whole nother ballgame. Okay, and I'm going to stop with this one so you guys can get caught up in your reading, and I can answer any questions tomorrow that you have from this stuff. And then we'll deal with the Stamp Act and the backlash from that tomorrow. Questions today?
That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
It was wonderful?
Wonderful.
Why was it wonderful?
We learned a lot.
Oh, excellent. Sam?
Okay, so what are we supposed to read for tonight? Okay.
Here's what I would like.
It's delicious. She's like,
Ideally, I want 182 to 208 done for tomorrow. Yeah.
yeah.
What is it?
I would say skim 182 to 196, 'cause that's what I just talked about. Okay? Chop through it, see if there's anything in there that I didn't talk about that you have interest in, that I can explain to you or clarify for you. But read 196 to 208. Okay? At the end of like 194 to 196 is probably where it starts talking about the Stamp Act and the backlash of it. Start with it. Is what?
191 when it starts talking about the Stamp
Okay, so let's go to at least to 191, because I know you're not going to go to 182 up. Start at 191 and read. Okay? Because we'll spend the bulk of tomorrow talking about the Stamp Act and the Stamp Act Congress and aftermath and what kind of happened. And if we can start getting into 196 to 208 tomorrow, that'd be great. Okay? Questions?
Can I go to the computer lab?
Yes.
Just like 3 minutes, Tyler.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
So go.